Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
Sir, this evening, I thought that as Africa moves quite center stage, as some of the developments that are happening in Niger, that we start off with that today. However, sir, I've had quite a lot of people send notes to me to say, hey, Prof is calling the president of Nigeria illegitimate and his election in ECOWAS. And I thought, let me throw that to you first, sir, and hear your response to that.
Well, really, I would have preferred that we start on a note that will not inflame me. If we are starting to have a nation of illiterates, then we might as well pack up shop. And I then don't need to really waste the time of people who come onto this program, and also waste my own time having to deal with idiocies in commentaries on what one has said and what one has not said. One of the tragedies of the social media is the way whatever one says gets twisted around, even when that means lying and forgetting one's values of reasoning and of scholarship in order to discredit the target of their own venom, not the target of my own analysis. Fortunately, the interview where people are making clips is available, and that is Arise TV. I never had a telephone conversation with some anonymous person or persons. In that interview, I drew attention to the fact that South Africa said that it is because Tinubu's election is illegitimate, contentious, that was what provoked the coup in Niger. I said that makes no sense to me, especially coming from a country where their own president has a corruption charge hanging around his neck, and where he had used the ANC majority in parliament to overturn the findings of a judicial body set up by that same parliament that has found him guilty of corruption charges. I said, it doesn't make sense that then such a thing, such commentary on Nigerian president will be coming from South Africa. That's what I said. I debunked and discredited the views of the South African commentary. So how could, I don't want out of anger to now start using words that I even should not be using. But how could some people now twist what I have said around, give it a different title, even though the clip from Arise TV is there to say I said President Tinubu's election is illegitimate and that kind of thing. Presumably, they just be hanging around the corner now to twist just what I am saying now around you know, it's this is not the, you know, this is not the Nigeria where I used to lecture. This is not the Nigeria where I was DG NIA. This is not the Nigeria where I was a minister. And it's incredible when some of the people who do this are not illiterate. They are well-educated professionals, and yet they forget all these their attributes because they have an angst against the election of a particular individual. It reminds me of what is happening in the United States, where irrespective of what Trump does, Fox TV and their, you know, group of irrational human beings will support Trump. And Trump himself has said so. Even before he was elected the first time, he said, I can go onto Central Park in New York, bring out a gun and shoot and kill people, and my supporters will still vote for me. And that's happened. And that's what we are starting to have in Nigeria now. It doesn't matter the rationality of the debate or the conversation you are having. In fact, we are no longer having conversations. We are having distorted shouting matches where what you didn't say, you'll be told, you'll be portrayed as saying it. And people will forget principles of analysis, principles of interpretation. This is not, in fact, the issue you've just raised. You will not be the first person to raise it. I don't like to go on ego trips on our program like this. But even last night, a very important personality, first class in Nigeria, called me around 11:30 at night to say, I've been told you said this. And I had to say, I never said anything of the sort. So right from the beginning, let me lay down, please, the parameters of our interaction this evening. Number one, interpretation and analysis of what somebody said should not be interpreted as an endorsement of what he said. My job as a scholar is to give an explanation, at least my own reading, of why something was said. And that's not tantamount to my endorsement of that point of view. I mean, I've been 65 years as a scholar in international relations and political science to know the rules of interpretation. I stand before my students and I say, this is the theory of X, Y, Z, and this is what it means. And I never say I am. If I'm going to endorse, I will say that my own position is X, Y, Z. I'm in favor of what has just been said, or I am not. Secondly, given my status in this country, don't expect me to get onto a platform and demarket my president. When I demarket my president, especially on a foreign policy issue, I demarket my country. And when I demarket my country, I'm demarketing all of us. And that is why there was a time in the United States when the principle of foreign policy by the political class was that partisanship stops at the water level. Once you cross the waters then partisanship stops, and we all rally around the president, commander-in-chief. And that is why American foreign policy had that unanimity of support. Yes, now the United States has abandoned that. Kudos to them. Good luck to them. Even though I find out that even in this day and age when public opinion in America is divided 50-50 on a lot of issues, they all still line up behind Biden on support for Ukraine and on support for NATO. So let's get that clear. I will explain what I believe the policies of the president of Nigeria is on Niger. Whether I am in favor or not, I will say so. But I'm not going to demarket my president or demarket my country. Number three or number two, I'm not a mathematician, so I have never been able to count properly. I haven't spent all my life being a foreign policy analyst or scholar or practitioner. So now wish for a Nigerian foreign policy of Owambe. Our policy has to stand for something. We must be noted for something. If you disagree with what we are noted for, or you don't want us to be noted for anything, say so in terms of, disagreeing with me. And finally, I can't remember what else. Please, I am inviting my fellow participants on this platform. Challenge me. Let us have a robust discussion this evening on our policy and the policy of ECOWAS on Niger. If you want the charter of ECOWAS scrapped, so ECOWAS stands for nothing, ECOWAS is for nothing, and we all have an annual jamboree of of summits where we exchange cheers and on champagne and then go home, then come out and say so. But don't just stand there and say, well, Nigeria should not be doing this and Nigeria should not be doing that and ECOWAS should not be doing it. Well, what do you want ECOWAS to stand for? And what do you want Nigeria to stand for? That is the debate I'm looking forward to this evening.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure we're going to get to that debate this evening. But let me ask you to open the conversation, because as I thought about it, it feels to me that ECOWAS finds itself in this conundrum of 7 days is already counting down. And in fact, the AU, I think they were 14 days or something like that. The days are counting down. And what do? Do they intervene militarily in this situation? And where does that leave the region from a stability point of view? And thirdly, is Nigeria even ready to lead this kind of debate? Over to you, sir.
Well, I don't know what you mean by is Nigeria ready to lead this debate? You become part of the conversation. What do you mean by that question? Is Nigeria ready to lead this debate? What has led to that question?
So the angle I'm looking at, sir, is this. President Tinubu is the ECOWAS chair. He's just been elected into office. It's going to be very difficult for people to separate President Tinubu, the Nigerian president, from the ECOWAS chair. And if he goes in as ECOWAS chair and he takes a stand, that may impact his perception, where the Nigerian people say, hey, now you're looking at this international affair you are not looking at the domestic problems that we have. And that's what I mean by, are we able to even lead the conversation there?
If you don't want to become involved in international affairs, then don't join international organizations. Resign from all your international organizations. I thought this was what we were criticizing Jonathan for. I thought this was what we were criticizing Buhari for, that in the past 16 years, Nigeria has been absent on the global scene. Come on, we've got to be consistent on that, on this matter. And it will have nothing to do with our body language towards whoever is holding that post. Is the president of, is the chairman of ECOWAS, is the president of Nigeria. Now, you may be wanting to make a distinction where there is no distinction. But the fact you must bear in mind is that Nigeria is just one country in ECOWAS with one vote. If he manages to persuade his colleagues that this is the position that ECOWAS should take, because this is the position he believes in, that is the way politics is played. If you are chairman of a party and you go to your party's national working committee or national executive council, they will be expecting leadership from you. And if you don't show that leadership, you are going to get a waffling of your political party. The same thing goes for an international institution. In fact, that is what the concept of sovereignty is all about. They are not committed to following you like sheep. They all have their national interests, and they will take their decisions on whether to support a resolution or oppose that resolution based on an assessment of their national interest. If we were paying the budget of ECOWAS countries, then you could say they have no choice. But we are not doing that. So to that extent, President Tinubu has one vote in ECOWAS, even as chairman, and I'm not sure he has a casting vote. If ECOWAS end up being 50-50, I don't think he has a casting vote. That doesn't happen in international institutions. The others will turn their back. They will not support you. So the ECOWAS has taken a stand on Niger. That stand was not taken in vacuum. ECOWAS has a charter. A charter is an aggregation of principles that you all signed on to. If somebody is going to ask ECOWAS to do something that is not in the charter, this will be pointed out on a point of order, Mr. Chairman. This is not part of our charter. But if it is part of their charter, then they debate it. And if the majority would then carry the day. But if the majority says, well, it may be part of our charter, but we don't want to interpret it that way, then they will vote it down. So let's get on with that. Let's get on with that conversation.
Sir, the second point of the question is this, sir. When the 7 days or the ultimatum that's been given expires, do you expect to see forces on the ground straight away? Does ECOMOG even have a force that they can deploy rapidly? And I think we discussed this a while ago about a central force that could be in Africa that could be help with this kind of situations. What do you think will happen at the end of the 7 days?
Thank you very much for that question. I think we've misinterpreted the concept of 7 days. At the expiry of the 7 days, it does not mean that boots are going to be on the ground. You yourself have pointed out, and quite legitimately and quite accurately, that there is no rapid response force for ECOWAS or for the AU for that matter. Number two, there is no standing by force yet. Although the ECOWAS was supposed to have set up one long time ago, but for financial reasons, nobody wanted to put money down, and Nigeria was not prepared at that time, to put the money down to establish, a standby force. So at the expiry of the 7 days, it does not mean that boots are going to be marching into Niger. At the end of the 7 days, even conversation with the military regime in Niger could be ongoing. I said this on the Arise TV, that diplomacy doesn't stop with the diplomacy doesn't stop simply because you've put on the ground what did we call the 7 day, the ultimatum. Before that ultimatum even expires, I will expect that there will be conversations behind the line, behind the chair, that contacts, whether by state actors or non-state actors, would be taking place, so that none of the parties would lose face. And if there is going to be any concession made, it does not have to be announced on the international media or on the local media. I expect that to be taking place, and I do expect them to tell us. But in fact, as of this morning, it has been announced that a delegation of ECOWAS, although there will continue to be this misapplication of which is ECOWAS, which is Nigeria. But I know as of this morning, it's been announced that the regime in Niamey has agreed to receive a delegation made up of the former head of state, General Abdul Salam Abubakar, and the Sultan of Sokoto, who, even though we call him the Sultan of Sokoto, but in fact, is the head of the Muslims in West Africa and commands a lot of respect. He has gravitas all across West Africa. We'll be going, and the new regime in Niamey has agreed to receive them. That is the kind of thing which will have started before even the expiry of the 7 days. And at the expiry of the 7 days, nothing prevents ECOWAS to say, we are in consultation, we are having a discussion with the regime there, talks are taking place, and that is part of what we expect will be happening even at the expiration of the 7 days. But the 7 days, expiration of the 7 days, does not mean boots on the ground. That's not the way diplomacy works. As long as there is movement, I won't say that you suspend the 7 days, but it is understood there's not going to be any military action at the end of the 7 days. And in any case, it's going to take you more than 7 days to put to amass troops on the border between ECOWAS countries and army. But the fact that talks are taking place will also not stop your military experts from continue also to map up what their be their reaction if the talks fails.
Let me ask another question, sir. And this is the response from Mali and Burkina Faso, where they've said that any attempt to attack Niger would be an attack on Mali and Burkina Faso. What do you think about that division that we're seeing within that ECOWAS group of those countries, also led by military leaders? But what's your view about that? And should that happen, would those three countries stand a chance against a force that's backed by ECOWAS?
Well, what they have said is not what has created a division in ECOWAS. The coups that have taken place in those 3 or 4 countries are what has created the division within ECOWAS. And you don't expect that the military regimes in ECOWAS are going to support ECOWAS. I expect them to back up the military regime in Niamey, especially in their own national interest. Because if military action takes place and there is a restoration of democracy in Niger, I'm sure they will then expect that they will be the next targets. Therefore, it is in their best interest to make sure that there is no military incursion into Niamey, and that way they will be safe. So there is a congruity of interest between them and Niamey. So whether they can take on ECOWAS or not, well, I will suppose you can put 10 of me in the ring against Muhammad Ali. I don't need to tell you what the result will be. So I don't start, denigrating the military prowess of any country, but you know what that will be.
Let's talk about the fact that some governments, Italy, specifically France as well, have started to evacuate their citizens from Niger. Is it too soon? I know the French embassy was attacked, but is it too soon for them to be doing that? And what do you think, sir, about the anti-French sentiment that was being expressed in the country?
Thank you very much for those questions. Please keep an eye on your modem, because I'm expecting pushbacks from some of the members on our platform, and I will welcome the pushbacks to my view. I am encouraging them to please join in this conversation. Before answering your question directly, let me put a question to you, which I'm not trying to put you on the spot, so I won't expect you to answer. Let's just say it's a rhetorical question. Have you asked yourself, why is the demonstrations in targeting only France? Why haven't they targeted ECOWAS countries. Why? I mean, after all, it is ECOWAS that has given them 7 days ultimatum. And it is ECOWAS countries that have said there will be no, that they won't rule out the use of force. I just raised this so that we keep at the back of our minds the fact that, there are probably conversations and developments going on behind the screen, behind the speaker's chair, that we are not being told. And I suspect, this is just a suspicion on my part, that the military regime in the army itself, one, and of course this is to be expected, is the one behind sponsoring the demonstration, and the strict parameters of the demonstration has been made clear to those who are involved in the demonstration. Number 2, the issue you have raised addresses directly what I will call the analysis of the conspiracy theorists. I've asked, who is behind this coup? Who is behind this coup? There are some conspiracy theorists who say it's France that is behind the coup, or it's Western countries that are behind the coup. And then the question that follows is, if it is France that is behind the coup, why is it France that is being targeted by the demonstrators? France has 1,500 troops on the ground. The United States has 1,500 troops on the ground, all who are supposed to be involved in anti-terrorist operations. And yet the United States has not been a target of the demonstrators. So what is happening in Niger is not as clear as some of the conspiracy theorists that are being put out there. France has done the very sensible thing, evacuating its troops, evacuating its citizens, and Germany has followed, Italy has followed, and those are precautionary measures that you take when there are issues like this. After all, we saw what we all ran into in Sudan, when what looked like just a conflagration between 2 groups, were between the army and the Rapid Response Force of Sudan, now degenerated into
Hello, sir.
You can't hear me.
Go ahead, sir. We lost you for a second there.
Oh, okay. I was saying that the European Union countries are taking a sensible precautionary step in evacuating their troops, so that in evacuating their citizens, so that their citizens don't become hostages. It does not mean that France is going to use its troops to influence the outcome of what is going on in Niger. But the interesting thing is that there is no country apart from the military regimes in West Africa and Algeria who have been critical, or who have issued statements in support of the coupists. And that is in spite of the fact that they are members of the AU. Algeria is a member of the African Union, and it's one of those, that was part of the decision-making process that has given them 15 days ultimatum, and yet it has said it will have to come to the defense of Niger if there is if this degenerates into military discussion.
So one key question that comes to mind is when the issue in Burkina Faso manifested itself, there was a lot of condemnation. People spoke about it, spoke against it. Then we had the issue in Mali. People again made noise. They condemned the situation, but those military leaders are still in place. Mm-hmm. Why would Niger be different?
Well, good question. The same people who probably were very critical of calling ECOWAS paper tiger because it was never able to go beyond ordinary condemnation are now the same people, at least in Nigeria, who are now saying no, ECOWAS has no business with what is going on in Niger, and we shouldn't go beyond, our usual condemnation. You do, you are damned. You don't do, you are damned. I think what is different in the case of Niger is that you have a chairman of ECOWAS who has decided to draw the line that there will be no more coups in West Africa, that there will be no more coups, that ECOWAS should not tolerate coups or terrorism or anti-democratic acts in West Africa. And that if this happens, we should be prepared to match our words with action. I think that is the difference.
One question, sir, to the point you raised there. President Tinubu, when he was becoming ECOWAS chairman, and in that speech, he talked about coups. Is it coincidental, or do you think there was something already brewing behind the scenes that they knew of? And at the time that he made that statement, no more coups, that he was in fact sending a message to the people in Niger?
I must be frank with you. This coup in Niger at least caught me by surprise. I have spoken to one or two people who have said, no, it didn't catch them by surprise. Actually, it was something on the, that they suspected was in the offing. And when I asked for the evidence they gave me is something that is present in probably every African country, whether it is in Kenya, whether it is in Zimbabwe, whether it is even in South Africa itself. So to me, that's no evidence that we should have all been on the alert and we would have spotted that something was going to happen. There was no such evidence. There were no demonstrations. There were no strikes. There were no confrontations between jihadists and the troops. None. All of a sudden, of course, from evidence that is starting to come out, it looked like a small coup that was activated to save the military career of the man who has taken over. That's really what is behind this. And that's why I said it's very difficult to subscribe to conspiracy theories that some external force engineered this. So the answer to your question is when President Tinubu made that statement, he was not thinking of any particular country. And truth be told, I really wasn't expecting that it would be challenged so soon after making that speech in Guinea-Bissau and repeating the same speech in Nairobi. I wasn't expecting that there would be an immediate challenge to his doctrine and to his promise that action must be matched, or that words must be matched by action. This also must have caught him by surprise.
One question on a lot of people's mind, and I can see that there's a comment from someone here, is that has ECOWAS actually looked into the possible cause of coups, like bad leadership, corruption across the board, and is this the main cause for coups in Africa?
You will recall that even when we debated this, whether it was last week or week before, I said that it was a limited commitment he made in Guinea-Bissau. We should be against coups and we should be against terrorism. But when he got the pushback from civil society, from opposition leaders in West Africa, by the time he got to Nairobi, he had now extended the commitment to protect democracy, which means also to be in favor of good governance. Even the African Union in the past 5 years have continued to warn against term extension, sit tight president. What has just happened in the Central African Republic, where they've just now held a referendum to extend the term of the existing president there. And when the justices of the judiciary, spoke out against the measure, the president there removed them and replaced them with new ones. Now the referendum has been held, and the referendum has now extended, they've now the terms in their constitution, they've now extended it to allow for term elongation. And these are the kind of things that leads to coups. And I would have liked the AU to speak out forcefully against what has just happened in the Central African Republic. Fortunately, it's not part of the remit of ECOWAS. So one is not expecting a reaction before somebody says, is the ECOWAS not taking on too much on its plate? Central African Republic is not part of ECOWAS, but it's part of the African Union. But it is that kind of behavior in a Central African Republic that precipitates coups. You've had the same thing in Senegal, and common sense and wisdom simply prevailed when the president of Senegal now had to announce that he has no plans to extend his tenure. But by the time he said that, people have been killed on the streets of Dakar. There have been demonstrations, burning of tires, and what have you on the streets of Senegal. The issue should not even have arisen. The prospect of an elongation of time should not have arisen at all.
So when we look at the map and we look at ECOWAS and the countries that border it, Niger, and we look at the trend of this kind of military coups and things like that. We see Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Senegal, Guinea, I think in that space. What is it about that region that leads to this kind of coups? We know that it's a poorer region, the Sahel region, and all of that. But what is it about that space that it gradually it seems to be coming down when we look at the map down that list? How do we prevent it from growing beyond where it is and spreading to the other countries on the map?
Well, I think that what one of the factors that we can identify as leading to the destabilization in the Sahel was what happened in Libya and in Tunisia during the Arab Spring, which we now know was nothing more than destabilization of the Arab world and the Mediterranean by European countries. The assassination of Colonel Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, and Libya has not been one country since it was assassinated by forces of NATO, and the militia that were present there when he was in power, after he got killed, simply they couldn't go across the sea into, they couldn't go across the Mediterranean into Europe, so they came down into the Sahara Desert. The same thing when ISIS was, crushed in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and what have you. The jihadist forces simply crossed, the Mediterranean Sea and came into the Sahel, and now teamed up with the local forces there to now start destabilizing the governments that were there. The second factor, of course, has been the behavior of France, and we must point that out. France for 60 years, if not more than that, behaved abominably in the Sahel and in these countries. These were former Francophonies, French-speaking African colonies. France, was determined to continue its exploitation of those countries. France was the first one that masterminded a coup in West Africa when it overthrew the government of in Togo of Olympio. And since then, West Africa actually had not known any peace in terms of democratic government. This was followed by coups in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, and all over. Well, the destabilization program of the former colonial territories was what led Nkrumah to propagate that theory of neocolonialism, the last stages of imperialism. There was nobody who could stand up to them. And, they then tell us that, they left us with democracy. They didn't leave us with democracy. Till the last minute of colonial rule, the governor generals had, veto power over any legislation. Then overnight, you run up the flag, and then you expect them to behave like Democrats. And even when they tried to be, if they were going to be nationalists, you engineered troops that you have trained, their own troops that you have trained, and that you still have influence over to overthrow them. So really, I don't want to be one of those that you say, haven't we had enough time to get over this? Have they ever left us alone? Yes, they used our own people. I mean, I want to brush that aside. There will always be Judases in every system. There will always be people who would benefit from being agents of destabilization. They will always be there. Don't expect that we will all be 100% saints. No. Even in the Garden of Eden, I mean, there was one serpent who also then had an agent that he used to overthrow the kingdom of God that was planted there. So this is what's been happening. This is what has been happening. But again, let me use this opportunity to praise the Gaddafis, praise the Thomas Sankaras, praise the Nkrumahs, praise the they have the nationalists, but they were no match for the forces of neocolonialism.
Let me take you to the United States very quickly, sir. Former President Trump has been criminally charged with illegally conspiring to overturn an election loss to President Biden. How do you react to that news, sir?
We were expecting it, were we not? Why it has taken so long for this? We were all sitting in front of our television sets in January 6th, if you recall, when the attacks were mounted on Congress. We saw the speeches made by Trump, by his lawyers, by urging the crowd to move on and go and do what it was that they had to do. And I don't know why it will have taken two and a half years to amass evidence against Trump. At times, justice delayed is also justice denied. Now people are getting fed up. People are saying, well, it's because you are targeting the 2024 elections that you are targeting Trump, which is not true. But we've left the room open for such speculations by pro-Trump forces and even forces that are not pro-Trump, but who are really just tired and fed up of all these trials and whatever by the Department of Justice. But we were expecting it. It's going to boost it's going to strengthen the support of Trump amongst his base. And don't forget that the last elections 2 years ago between Trump and Biden was close. I mean, when we are talking about 150 million voters, and it's almost 70-70, that was close. America is divided down the line, and the supporters of Trump will never change their mind. So you could bring another 10 charges or indictments against him, they will still vote for him. My fear, my uneasiness is that the Democrats and the independent voters are usually the liberals. On one hand, on the other hand, yes, Biden has done this, but on the other hand, Biden has done that. I'm not really sure why you get this vacillation among liberal voters. The Trump supporters have no such vacillation. No such vacillation. They will vote for him. because he promised he will make America great. Whether he ever succeeded or not becomes, temporary, becomes a contentious issue. They will vote for him. And if the liberals continue to vacillate in next year's election, with some of them not voting at all, we may then have Trump marching back in to the White House. And then all these charges that were brought against him will become a nullity. Now, we will just have the Department of Justice that will not pursue, and that will not pursue these charges. And that will now strengthen the hands of forces like in South Africa, who are also using their own presidency to protect their president from corruption charges. And then people will now say, oh, Africa, the Africans are against the judiciary, they're against this, they're against that. Well, they'll be following the lines and the footsteps of the Trumpists in the United States.
Thank you very much, sir. We have run out of time tonight. But we'll be back same time next week to continue the discussion. And hopefully we'll get more people to participate. I'm sure there will be more developments on this, and we'll see where that takes us. On that note, thank you to our viewers. I think I see a hand up. Is that correct?
Maybe two hands.
Okay, I can see one. Hold on, sir. Let me see if I can get that hand. Bear with me, sir. Please unmute yourself, sir. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Sorry, I think this is Professor Akin Akinyemi.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, sir. All right, I think there's a problem.
Thank you,
with
sir. Question
your
that
connection.
was not responded to, or probably there was no indication.
Hello, sir.
That is precisely how to explain the fact that France has remained target.
Sir, I think there might be a challenge with the broadband there.
Okay, look, let me see.
Yes, sir. I think that there are network issues there. I'll come back to you. Let me see if I can note the other person. Please put your question in the chat box, if possible, and then I would relay that. Yes, sir. Put the comment in the chat box, sir. I'll wait for that. Okay, sir. Let me just do a quick check, please. If you have your hand.
Can you hear me? Well, sure. Hello.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Most unfortunate. Okay. All right. Next Thursday.
Go ahead, sir. We can hear you, sir. All right, I think we've. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Akinyemi. And to our guests, to our viewers, we'll be back next week with more updates and more current news. Good night for tonight. Good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you.